Hi, JC. Merry Christmas 2012. This is one of your Christmas gifts. And it's telling you some interesting things about your dear grandmother, Edith Oliver Lohr. And she was a very special woman. I loved her dearly. And she's one of the most amazing people that I've ever known in my life. And not just because obviously she's my mother. And I know how well you knew her, but I know that in this little brief thing I'm going to share, you'll find some things that you didn't know about her, guaranteed on that point. And I'm the last one that can share them, oddly enough, now that my brother's gone. And we both took after her in a lot of ways. Let me start with a bio of her. She was born and grew up partially in Salem County. Or Salem City, I mean, and that was 37 Ward Street where she was born. And the interesting thing was, I'm a little hazy on how she wound up back in Clayton, but at some point, her father, who was a glassblower, David Oliver, who later had a chicken farm during the Depression, um, he went to work in Bridgeton or Salem, and my mother asked if she could stay with them. And Dora and Hannah, her two younger sisters, went with the family, but they allowed her to stay and live with William Francis Stockton and Hannah Reeves Stockton, my great grandmother that I knew and called Baba, but my great grandfather, Stockton, died before I was born. And my great grandmother, Hannah Stockton, died in my home when I was 5 years old, the night before our 4th of July picnic. She had a heart attack during the night. Um, but I knew her well as a little boy. And my mother, the fact that she was raised by them, it made her a little different than Dora and Hannah. You could tell the difference. They were very proper type, English people. And they loved reading and they instilled that in my mother. She was a fast reader. She used to say her great grandfather couldn't believe how fast she read books, so he would quiz her on them. And he called her Edith with the Laughing Hair, which I think is a poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. I looked it up once, or a line in a poem. And uh, she had a very beautiful childhood with them. I don't know just how many years, but I think it was several years. And she said Dora and Hannah used to kid her because the nickname they gave her was Dolly. And they called my mom Dolly. And she got a lot of culture from them. And when she was a teenager, she had a religious experience at Ara Camp, which is Ara's right near the junction of Buck Road and 55 where they meet. There was a religious camp there that she attended in the summer. And that's where she decided seriously within herself to be a Christian. And that never left her. Her faith guided her life and gave her strength throughout her life. And she had a lot of challenges. She got married very young, had her first child when she was 17. She was supposed to have gone to art school, which was going to be funded by Uncle William Shad, who wasn't related except by marriage. He married Laura Stockton, who was my grandmother's cousin, Ethel Stockton's cousin. And her father was Uncle Thomas Stockton, who you have a ring of, pinky ring, I believe. And she didn't wind up in art school. And Uncle William had been very wealthy in New York, a very wealthy family, William Shad. And Laura Stockton died young, and I never knew her. I just knew my Uncle William and his sister, Aunt Caroline. And they moved down here after they lost all their money. They owned vast sections of real estate in New York and were quite wealthy. And they used to give all us kids and cousins, for every Christmas a package of Hershey bars. You always knew what you were getting from Uncle William and Aunt Caroline. But anyway, getting back to, I lost my train of thought there, but how my mom grew up differently. She never went to art school, but she was extremely talented musically. She could play several instruments. Uh, the piano, you heard her play, and it's probably the only one I ever heard her play. But she could also, in her young years, play the trumpet, the guitar, the ukulele, the banjo, the violin. She was extremely talented, had a beautiful singing voice. She sang in the church choir for many years, and she was just a gorgeous singer. I wish you could have heard her sing in her prime. And she, played the piano throughout her life. She could listen to something on the radio and play it by ear, and it was just magical. Her musical talent. She also had something that's pretty rare, which is called perfect pitch, where she could be in another room, and if you hit a note on the piano, she could tell you what that note was. Very small percentage of people, whether they're musicians or not, have that ability, perfect pitch, and that was unusual. And she enjoyed music throughout her life. She loved jazz music. She loved Dave Brubeck, Earl Garner, Earl Grant, jazz organist, Oscar Peterson, uh, Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Perry Como, popular music like Andy Williams. She loved, you know, uh, you know, Dean Martin, all the popular music. A favorite of her was a piano player named Roger Williams, who just died a few years ago, and Andy Williams just died a month or so ago, uh, and she just loved music, uh, everything about it, and classical was also jazz and classical, popular music. Those three were her favorite. Classical, she loved Chopin. She loved Leonard Bernstein, the conductor, and of I think the Boston Pops or some group like that. She loved Vladimir Horowitz, a famous pianist. She loved Rachmaninoff. I don't know if I mentioned him, a Russian classical composer. And she had stories about, Schumann and different. She loved telling me stories. She knew the history of the writers, the musicians, the songs, and she was extremely bright. Uh, One of her favorite songs was a simple classical song, Traumerei, and it was written by a man who went insane, and he was the son-in-law, I think, of Franz Liszt. Uh, and I'm packing information in here just as it comes to me because I want you to have these little details that somewhere in the future you or your girls can pick up on some of these strands and, see. She was very artistic. She could paint and draw beautifully. Um, and She loved to talk. She was extremely well read. And because she could read so fast, she probably averaged reading a couple books a week her entire life. She loved to read mostly fiction, mysteries, and, detective stories and things like that. But she also loved to read biographies. She was a lifelong Democrat. She used to work at the polls. She was friends with the wife of a famous senator from our area, Senator Sharp. His wife, Thelma Sharp, was a lifelong friend of hers, and I never knew it, but they were relatives of mine on the Lohr side. Didn't know that at the time. But she loved Democrats because that was where her heart was, but it was also her culture. All the early Irish immigrants, and her father, of course, was Irish, and Italian immigrants, were all in the beginning mostly Democrats because that was the nature of things. The next generation, when they got a little bit of money, tended to maybe be Republican. But that's how my mom was, and she loved to follow politics. She watched the public television show every week, the one that's on Friday night. I can't remember the name. Uh, It used to be a McLaughlin Report. Now a black woman runs the a half-hour political show. She would watch the morning Sunday shows when she, wasn't in church. Meet the press and that sort of thing. She followed the news. She read paper. She was a voracious reader and took in all kinds of information. And she had two sides, this very ladylike side that I think came from that bringing up. You can see her photo here that I took down at the cabin, that we had. And that same day, I'll show you another one, that I took that shows another side of her. But she was exuberant and joyful about life. She was passionate about many things. She loved nature along with the music and art. And she was a great friend, had a great group of friends, always supportive of her family and her friends. She was first president of the women's group at the church. And, she always felt a little funny because she never graduated high school. She had her first child, Aunt Lois, when she was 17. And it was so ironic. I tried to share with her how I finally got her to take a course or two at Cumberland County College. And I said, Mom, you could teach a course at that level. And she was so surprised to learn what I already knew, that she was like the top student by far in the class. She got her own education through her reading, and her raw intellect was something that surpassed mine, my brothers, and my sisters. If I played a word game with her, and we used to do that a lot, making words out of one big word and how many you could get, I never came close to beating her. It was ugly. She was so good at it. My vocabulary isn't shabby, but hers was just unbelievable because of her reading. And she was very patient. She was very kind and considerate. And you've experienced many things, wonderful things with her. And you experienced the love she had for you. And that was great because her other grandchildren, Harry's children lived far away, so there wasn't the same closeness there. And even though Lois's children lived there, just something never quite, I don't think my brother-in-law Parksy encouraged that closeness. So you were the grandchild she had, the close relationship with, and I'm so grateful for that. We got very close for a lot of things because we took care of my dad together. I talked about challenges. She, got married young to a guy who was, to put it as nicely as possible, a philandering husband, all his life until he finally left her with two small children, Harry and Lois, when they were like 11 and 12. And prior to that, the youngest child, a few years before that, died, Bobby, when he was maybe about a year and a half or 2 years old. And that's the hardest loss of all. And when my mother would talk about it, it was like it happened just like a month ago. Being a single parent in that time, in, the early 1940s, I guess, would have been it. And during World War II, it was very unusual back then and difficult. And she told me how difficult it was raising Harry and Lois. And she always felt somewhat guilty that, they didn't have a father in the family, because once their father left, that was it. He didn't have anything to do with them. And she always felt bad about that till the day she died. And I'd always tell her how amazing it was that she was able to raise those, children and do as well as she did. Her character was very strong. She told me late in life that, when she, at some point when she was a single parent, sometimes she didn't know how she'd buy shoes for the kids, and something would always come that way. And she had a lot of faith in God providing for her, and shared that with me. she said that her parents almost lost their farm. That they had a chicken farm and vegetable farm, grew asparagus, and you know they got behind in taxes. She herself went to the bank and cut a deal with them to take over, the mortgage and you know get things squared away. That's the kind of amazing person she was. Strength of character and an iron will. And I saw that strength of character come out in the kind of loving wife she was to my father. And she had these challenges that, her mother died, was only, I think, 59. It happened in June again. She said all the bad things in her life happened in June. Her husband left in June. Bobby left in June, or Bobby died in June, and her mother died in June. And a few other things thrown in there I can't remember. She's very close to her two sisters, Hannah and Dora, and she said Mama always wanted them to be very close. Uh, and she was so joyful around the house. She would sing around the house. She'd sing in the morning to me two songs I remember. One was Rise and shine and give God the glory, glory, rise and shine and give God the glory, glory. And she had such a gorgeous voice. The other one she'd sing was a song Lazy Bones. Look that up. You'll find the lyrics kind of funny to that popular song. She loved Nat King Cole. Um, she loved uh, so many things. Her home. Uh, she had other challenges taking care of my dad. When I was 3 years old, he had his first major stroke and was paralyzed. And that was a tough thing. And I never saw her waver. He had other major strokes and he was sick on and off most of his life. And she helped him in his business and kept the books and things of that nature. And then when he died, she went out and got a job, but a menial secretarial job. When if she'd had the education, I mean, she had the ability to be, you know, quite a few different things in life, very much successful in that way in life. But she was successful in all the other ways of life, as I hope you're getting from this. And she was she just didn't say unkind things about people. She avoided that. She tried to always find something nice to say and always find something to be understanding. Not that she didn't get ticked off about something, she did, but she handled it well. A lot better than I handle it. But I've told you about her challenges. Oh, one late in life was her blindness, and that was devastating. I gave her books on tape, as many as she could use, but she missed reading so much. And she. I talked about her talents, her character, her past personality. I think I've covered a lot of things of how special she was. And fun. Oh my gosh, this other photo I took that same day down at the cabin is right here, you know. And she wanted me to stop taking her photo, and she thought this would do it. Obviously, it didn't work. But, my love of practical jokes I got from both parents, my mother and my father. And we were always teasing, and, she was always teasing me about all kinds of things, spooking me, scaring me. I remember I was about 10 years old, and she asked me to go out. It was a summer night, and it was dark outside. And she said, Johnny, I left my keys in the car. Could you go get them for me? And I said, sure, Mom. And I went out and I got the keys out of the car. And just as I turned to go back in, she said, oh, Johnny, on the way back, don't trip over the dead man. Well, I leaped over whatever I thought where a dead man might be and ran back into the house. But that was just her way. She was very affectionate. She told me my father helped her be more affectionate after she met him. And They had a wonderful courtship. They went to Phillies games. He was an avid Phillies fan. And she said she never understood till later how they always, on the spur of the moment, he said, "You want to go to a game?" And she'd say, "Well, we don't have tickets." And he'd say, "Well, they have them there put aside for me." And she never knew that he'd always go to the window with her and say, "Do you have tickets for Mr. Lore?" And he'd always slip him a $10 or $20 bill. And they'd slip him tickets. Of course, they didn't have them reserved, but uh, she she told me late in life where she met him. She met him. My Aunt Hannah was married to a man named Jack Kessel, and they right near Freeze's Mill. They had a little tavern, had food and drink. And back then there was always like live entertainment. And she said Aunt Hannah would encourage her to come out because she was by herself and alone. And just my mother, never had more than one drink or two at a time in her whole life. But she loved music and she'd go out there just, to be around people. And my father and my uncle Narchi Rigo were coming home from someplace in Philly, and they stopped there. And she said, my dad came over to her and said, "You see that fellow over there I was sitting with? He said he wanted me to. He's a little shy. He wanted me to come over and ask you to dance with him. But he said, if anybody here is going to dance with you, it's going to be me." And that's how they met. And she was embarrassed to tell me they met. She didn't want me to think she met my father in a bar. And, funny stuff like that. We had so many good, serious talks about every topic under the sun: family, faith. She was spouting scripture verses. And I heard the parable of the talents so many times: use what God's given you or you'll lose it. I heard that so many times in my life, it drove me crazy. And we had so many great heart-to-heart discussions about every topic you can imagine, truly. And she loved you very, very much. And she would be so thrilled at the family you have. And I'm happy to be able to share these sporadic thoughts about such a special person that my mother was. And I loved her very much, and I know you did too. Merry Christmas 2012.